chapter clicked in to College Volleyball Weekly on Viral Volley Media. Now here's your host, Rob on mic.
Good day all, and welcome to yet another episode. It's episode 3 of our 2024 NCAA Men's Division I-II volleyball season. It's episode 203, College Volleyball Weekly. Oh, I gotta get used to saying this, Men's Top 20, which sounds awesome. So with me, as always, go left to right on my screen. It's Jay Hosick of George Mason, Brad Rostratter of UC San Diego, Dan Friend of Lewis, and Theo Edwards of CSUN. Good day, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Morning, Rob.
I like your other names that I've given you guys. You have the Mighty Jay Hossicks, the Almost Buckeye Busters, Brad Brostratter. Then you have the Danalians and then the Theoites. Those are the new team names I'd love to go with.
Aliens.
Brad would like a revision on that.
Squash that.
What's that?
I want to just squash that.
Well,
I like the Dan Aliens. You can't get rid of that. I love
Miami Mall Dan Aliens.
You guys all suck.
The more you protest, the more it stays.
I know. I knew that. Yeah.
Well, it's unfortunate that we got to start our show with some sad news that broke last week, and it was the passing of Tom Tait of Penn State University. And like I said, I didn't know him personally, so I reached out to people who did, and some of the people on the screen actually did live in the area where Tom was, and that would be Jay Hosick back in his assistant days at Penn State. So, but I want to let you guys share anything that you know about Tom Tait just to honor and remember him. And let's start with you, Jay.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of meeting Tom when I first got the job at Penn State, and his history and tradition with that program starts all the way back from the beginning. He is the literal godfather of Penn State men's volleyball, and I know that when the news broke, I know that the Nittany Lion, Nation and all them were just heartbroken. He is a facet day in and day out there. I know that Pav continually talked to them all the time. He came up to watch matches all the time over the years, and for someone who has had their finger on the pulse and helped grow the game to where it is now, not only on the East Coast, but across the country from the very beginning. I mean, he was there from the 70s and helped build that program. It almost was dropped at one point, and he put together a campaign and brought a whole bunch of people together and got it to move on to varsity status and keep the program. And obviously, the success over the years, but it's a sad loss. And I know that we're going to be sending a note to Penn State volleyball and just kind of, showing our condolences and our support of them. And, Tom will not be forgotten. I've had the pleasure of working with some junior national teams over the year as a head of delegates, and just a really wonderful human being. So it's a really sad loss.
Yeah. Any other guys want to chip in? Any thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, Tom was awesome. I had him on a couple of USA U21, U19 trips with us as our head of delegation, and got to learn a lot from him, and really enjoyed his company. It was just a super great human, and so certainly mourn his loss from the volleyball community, and condolences to the Penn State family and all his family at the same time.
Yeah.
I had no idea who he was, and looking him up when seeing that, and you think of Penn State, and you think of Pav and Russ Rose, and just seeing that, like, he paved the way for those guys and all the success of the program. It really speaks to the history, and it speaks to the work that he had to do during that time to get things rolling. So it was really cool history lesson for me to get to learn about him, and obviously thoughts and prayers to Penn State and the Tait family. That's a legend right there.
Yep.
Yeah, I never had an opportunity to actually meet Tom, but a testament to what he has done is I always knew who he was. Then that's, obviously the things that he did at Penn State, but his appreciation for men's volleyball and in getting both those programs started there. It just shows, his legacy absolutely will live on in the sense that he really had an impact, and there's a lot of people who have done a lot for our game, and I think that it, you know, goes without saying that they need to be remembered. So it's definitely a hit for the volleyball community.
Well, I learned some things because Pav sent an audio file before he went on broadcast on Saturday night, so I'm going off of memory. But Tom Tait was a all ACC high jumper at the University of Maryland, from which he got his bachelor's degree in 1959. Went to Penn State to work on his master's and PhD there. Was called in or reeled into the track team, and a couple of women said, "Hey, can you coach our volleyball team?" And this is per Pat. He knew next to nothing about volleyball, but learned enough to get the program going. And then a few years later, the men asked him to do the same thing. And from there, it's all she wrote. Influenced the state of Pennsylvania volleyball right there. So look at the impact of one just saying, you know what, let's do this. Let's see what we can do. And, first, I mean, when I really started following the game, I'm going to date myself here. I remember seeing Javier Gaspar at Penn State in the national championship. I think it was 84. And I guess Tom Peterson was a coach that was right before Pav, correct? Historically. So, I mean, look at all the names that have gone through those programs. And then I guess the club programs really started to pick up in that area. And think of all the players that have come out from that and the influence that he's had in the entire U.S. volleyball, if not the world, because they did have international players too at the time. So, again, as Brad so well stated, prayers to the Tait and Penn State families. And we were thankful we were able to see the work of Tom Tait and see how that continues to grow, being that, volleyball has been growing so quickly and is some of the high energy and highly enthusiastic sports. So with that, let's go ahead and move into our week of action, which there was a lot, and some doled out some upsets, others received upsets, and some just, put out a great fight, but came up a little short. So let's start with, Dan is in that thinking position, and he's got to be happy coming off the 5-set victory over BYU. So what matches beyond your own, if you want to mention your own, you still can, caught your eye last week?
Well, I think I'd be remiss not to mention Mason upsetting Irvine. So that was pretty cool, and pretty stoked for Jay and his group. And they really put together a great match. And I didn't get to see it personally, Rob, but you were there. Do you know what I mean? And so but that was what I want to mention. So kudos to those guys. And I think they were coming off that Santa Barbara tournament. So I think they took that as a learning experience and put one in the bag, which I think will pay dividends for them down the road. And so, and then Stanford, I was watching Stanford because Stanford played Loyola. They had the doubleheader. Loyola rolled in maybe not their strongest lineup. Then they rolled in that stronger lineup. And Stanford came out with that win in 5. And certainly their go-to guys between Rotman and Wagner and Litsky setting the offense. And then you saw them play Santa Barbara twice. And again, the same list of guys, and they beat Santa Barbara in 5, and Santa Barbara, we were wondering how that test would be a little bit, and then Stanford won again. And so I think you're seeing Stanford put themselves in that position that, they're in that top 10 mix and may head towards the top 5 before we know it in terms of how they're competing and kind of how they're playing from that standpoint. The other one that I'll mention, maybe lower on the radar, I wanted to see how Lindenwood was going to do against GCU. And then GCU came out with both those wins because Lindenwood's got some older guys. AJ's been there for a few years and some pieces. And I was wondering how they would stack up with him. But GCU stayed pretty steady in terms of how they were competing, and those same guys producing the numbers that they need to. And probably my last one I got to throw is like Harrington with 13 aces against Queens. So just ridiculous. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so in terms of that, from that standpoint. So that was a little bit of mine. I know there's a ton of volleyball and a ton of stats, but I'm sure the rest of the guys will cover it all. So
well, let's let them add on to or critique your choices, Dan. Any thoughts on Dan's choices, you guys? Oh wow, silence. Whoa.
No, I actually think the first one he mentioned, the Mason victory, which was obviously a fantastic win for George Mason, but it stirred some roster changes. And I think we talked a little bit in the text thread during that Mason match. We saw some really creative volleyball, and we saw at one point Nolan Flexen in the middle. In set 5, we saw some just really, really creative things. And I think the conversation that we all had was that in women's volleyball, you do sometimes see this, but it's rare. And oftentimes the reason you do see it in the men's game, where you have an outside hitter that can go and be in the middle spot, or you'll see guys switch sides in the blocking schemes, guys playing different roles, different positions, is because a lot of times the depth is not there, right? Sometimes your tallest, your most athletic players are your tallest and most athletic players. Where on the women's side, due to the increase in scholarships, they have a little bit more depth and potentially more size and that next player that can go and do it and go and get it. And so it was fun to see. But then obviously after that match takes place, Irvine has a setting switch, and Brad Stewart now is starting to run the offense and doing a really, really nice job. Obviously they had some nice wins later in the week. And so I love to see, especially early on in the volleyball scheme of things, that as some losses and some wins start to happen, you start to see guys getting opportunities, roster changes, other players getting a chance to step up and make a difference. And we're starting to see it already. It's fun.
Brad, do you have anything to add?
No, just continuing kind of the UC Irvine conversation, is one of the matches that stood out to me, or one of the moments that stood out to me, was Hilaire Heno setting the Big West service aces record. And, Ben Harrington gets 13 aces, and then Princeton faces off with Irvine, a couple nights ago. And then Heno has 9 aces and continues to add to that record. And, it's something we've talked about extensively on the show last year and early on this year. But I think that performance and that, thinking about he still has lots of time to continue adding to that record is rather remarkable and pretty impressive. And I think that match was a really good display of what he can do from the end line, and the stress and pressure that it puts on the opposing team's receivers.
Yeah. Jay?
You guys have already talked about my match. I don't want to go any further. I'll be real honest with you. I was really impressed with Lewis and how they handled BYU. BYU's a good team, and they got a couple guys on there that can just bring the heat. He's an unsung hero. Capono Brown's got a cannon for an arm. That kid gets some velocity on his serves and on his swings, and it's not exactly your prototypical arm swing. There's a little bit more arm to it than there is, the torque and all that stuff. But man, oh man, can that get on it? But Daniel Haber had a real nice match for Dan, and I think he hit 478. That's slightly above average. And Lewis, I think Lewis and us are kind of in the similar boat, where last year we were in a little bit of rebuilding phases of our programs and didn't expect to be maybe in the hunt for anything significant. But both programs gain some experience. You take one on the chin a few times, you start to learn what it looks like and feels like, and next thing you know, you're translating into matches. And so kudos to Dan for beating BYU. It's not an easy thing to do, and just stoked for volleyball in general. There's a little bit of parity this year, which is kind of fun.
Yep. Well, let's go to Brad's matches he's watching in week 2.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't get to watch a ton of volleyball, but being able to go back and look at the stats and look at everything, Dan hit most of those matches that were pretty good. I think obviously the BYU and Loyola matchup, 9 versus 10 and going 5 and being 15-13 in the 5th, was a great demonstration of top 10 volleyball and some great performances there. And I think another kind of under the radar, St. Francis taking a set off Ohio State early in the week, then taking a set off Long Beach State, and then Andrew Deerdorf's had some really good performances in those matches. So I think St. Francis is maybe a team that we're seeing that can be making some moves to moving into that top 20 and start to scratch and upset some people as this early season matches are going on.
Just on the St. Francis, Irvine played them on Wednesday night, and Nathan Zinni, 14 kills, 0 errors, 570 something. And he's got a wicked arm. So I think St. Francis is going to be a really tough team to beat in the NEC this year, or even in non-conference. So great picks there, Brad. And I'll finish it out with Theo. Is that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple of interesting stories, right? And you guys touched on them a bit. Stanford, obviously, the rise of Stanford. They're I kind of what Jay was talking about, last year they were good but they had some losses that kind of pulled them away from that conversation a bit. And they obviously had a late run, but just not enough to get them there. But this year, I mean, Rotman is playing incredible. Had against Loyola, he had 20 kills, hit 515. And is just that whole team is really playing with some charge. It's pretty cool to see. Then you got UCLA, who takes their Midwest swing, goes through Chicago, has a lot of success against both Lewis and Loyola, although those were close battles. But they survived that swing and did a nice job. And then you got that little bit of Foursquare, right? Loyola takes a match from Hawaii. Hawaii loses later on to Loyola. Then Loyola loses to BYU. Then Lewis beats BYU. I mean, you're talking about some real Foursquare here, and just some fun, like Jay said, some parity, some really interesting volleyball, a lot of really, really talented teams. And it's really exciting for me, and I know for our game, when you start to see a lot of this action. And, if this, like we've talked about, the reason we're at that top 20 is anyone can beat anybody. It's any given night, and it's a lot of fun. This was a great week of volleyball.
Yeah. Well, let's bounce over to Jay.
You're asking me what matches I'm watching?
The ones that caught your eye, the results, even the Irvine Mason one. That's okay, Jay.
No, I'm not going to talk about that. I want to talk about the hot teams this week. Every year it seems to be there's a group of teams, a couple of teams that, for a few weeks at a time become the hot team at the moment. I think Stanford is that team at the moment that is the hot team to watch. They've had a couple of good wins. I think it was Costy's first win in Santa Barbara in like 10 years, which is very strange to me. But always nice to go back to his alma mater and get a W. I think Lewis is a hot team right now. They've shown that they've got some pieces. They've shown they've got the ability to beat big teams, and where that goes from here, obviously remains to be seen. But I have no doubt that the Danalians, if you will, are going to go out there and give it their all. Here's a team that I think people are not going to pay attention to, but you should. Long Island. I know they went into Long Beach, and I know Long Beach handled them. They've got some weapons on that court, and they got a little outside hitter who is just banging the snot out of that thing. I'd be keeping an eye on that team. I think St. Francis and them are going to be the two teams to beat as of today, if you're looking at the NEC. But man, LIU's got some players. I keep an eye on that team. And here's one that is a duh moment, but they're just going to be a steady team the entire year. Grand Canyon's going to be a handful moving forward. Gianni and Jackson are a formidable duo. Their setter Slight is the kid's fun as heck to watch. He slings it around the gym. He's got a real even-keeled personality on the court. Grand Canyon's going to be a team that come tournament time, at least in my eyes, they're going to be somebody you don't want to face. So those are what I've been watching.
Good stuff. And finish out with Brad.
Oh, I already went.
I'm sorry.
Well, hey, I'm going to throw.
I do have a follow-up for Jay. Your word of the year, is it snot this year? Because it's come up a few times already.
I have a deal with an NIL company, a Kleenex company.
Kleenex,
I
right?
use the word snot quite a bit, and all of a sudden they start sending me Kleenex like crazy. So
I'll throw one more out, Rob.
Yep.
And they're right outside the top 20. Purdue, Fort Wayne, and NJIT played in NJIT 1 and 5. And so we saw NJIT go on that swing out west and then come back and play a couple matches. And we know Purdue's got some senior, between their middle and Diedrich, who takes thousands and thousands of swings. And they've got some nice pieces and a new setter in that group. But both teams that I think for their leagues are going to be pretty tough. And they have some matches coming up this next week as well. But yeah, I just wanted to, I think Alessandro Negro had 26 kills and hit 470 in that match, which is pretty good for them. And so, yeah.
Well, a couple topics I'm going to throw out there since we have a little extra time here was we haven't really talked about UCLA. real deal or not. And then, of course, Long Beach State. We talked about LIU, who played against them, and St. Francis, who also played against them. But it was the first couple of matches for Long Beach State. So curious as to thoughts on, well, we'll go with Dan first in this one, since he got to experience UCLA firsthand this last weekend.
Oh, UCLA's, I watch them on paper or watch them on video, and they're really, really good. And then playing them in person, they're really, really good. So I think lots of pizzas, lots of depth. I think he's trying to figure out their libero and what that piece looks like. I think Knight played it partly because he might have had something going on knee-wise, but he still wanted him in the lineup. But, you know, tough to stop Merrick, and they just serve the ball probably tougher than anybody we faced. So, and BYU is pretty good, but, like, they've got a ton of serving pressure coming at you. And Ethan's one of my favorite players to watch, Chaplin. Like, he just does everything so good. Pass, defense, demeanor, how he carries himself, all the things that kind of come along with that. So they've got a lot of pieces and a lot of spots. And I was super proud with how we battled against those guys. So yeah, I think they're legit. I think they're the number one by a couple steps right now. Did we put ourselves in a position to push them? I thought we did a really nice job. And so, but in order to beat a team, you got to sustain it. And they're sustaining it. And I'm not even sure they're playing their best volleyball yet.
Thoughts on UCLA? Any other guys on the screen?
How could you not call them legit or the real deal? I mean, they return just about everybody. I know they're struggling a little bit with libero, but something tells me they've got a few guys on that bench that could step in at that position and do an okay job. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think you win with libero. I think you win with pin hitters. But that being said, yeah, UCLA's they're like Dan said, I think they're a little head and shoulders above everybody else right now. And if they haven't played their best volleyball yet, we got a little bit of an uphill climb across the country to catch up to it. But you never know. You can catch them on an off night. They start to hiccup once or twice here and there. You know, they might show a little bit of a chink in their armor, but I doubt it very highly right now.
Yeah. How about Long Beach? Go ahead.
I watched their match against Loyola. And you know, Dan touched on this a little bit, but the serving is truly probably the most impressive thing, especially for this point in the year, where if you watch a lot of the box scores, I think most teams are struggling with the consistency. But UCLA looks as much like a professional team from the perspective they have 6 servers, and all of them can hit the ball pretty darn well. And the service pressure that they put on Loyola, at least, I didn't get an opportunity to see Dan's match, but I would imagine it would be something similar, was just really, really impressive. You know, so in addition to that, they obviously have Merrick McKendry, who I think is maybe arguably one of the best middles in the country at this moment in time. And Andrew Rowan does a really nice job, and we all know what Ito is capable of, but I agree with Dan. I don't think they're playing their best ball. Wow. And as good as they are at this moment, I think they actually are going to get better. Yeah, they are number one, and they're the real deal for sure.
Yep.
And then, yeah, UCLA's, I think, the top team right now, and will be there until someone knocks them off. And then Long Beach, Rob, I know you wanted to get some insight on them, and watching a little bit of them, you know, against Long Island, they looked pretty clean, pretty efficient, not overwhelming, but really, really steady. And that's kind of been something they've gotten really, really good at over the last few years. And then the St. Francis match, they dropped a set to them in the third set. But I think St. Francis just kind of dug a little bit more balls, touched a few more balls at the net, and made some plays, which is obviously going to happen all the time. So I don't think it was them not playing great or them not being a strong team or up there in the top 1, 2, 3 range, like they're currently ranked. So
Yeah.
I think they're and they kind of have always slowly ramped into the season, you know, playing a couple Canadian teams, and I think they have an East Coast trip, if I'm not mistaken, this upcoming weekend. So it's I think they're kind of right on pace with where they expect to be, and where I think most of the country views them as a top formidable team in that caliber.
Yeah. Well, after seeing St. Francis and Long Island play, I mean, St. Francis was hanging tight with Long Beach State, you know, in the early parts of the match, but they are now equipped at the outside with Skylar Varga, who was impressive, and a Bulgarian middle, Lazar Buchkov. And of course, Mason Briggs is really steadies out, but Aiden Knight set a really good match, which I thought was hilarious. We were watching the UCLA Lewis match on the YouTube feed, which is a great platform to go on, Dan. And who pops up? Aiden Knight watching the match. So we're shooting comments back and forth. But Long Beach State looks like you actually called it. They slowly got into the match. As soon as it got to 20, that's when they took over. And they're going to be tough. Yeah, they're already good out of the gate. So, I'm looking forward to how much better both UCLA and Long Beach State get. If you're saying that UCLA still isn't as good as they can get, I'm like, that's pretty scary because they look pretty good.
So like the YouTube thing we did is actually on Volleyball TV YouTube. And so both matches, our UCLA and our BYU match, have over 22,000 views on that YouTube thing. So which was pretty cool of Volleyball TV to kind of help us use that platform kind of internationally wise as well.
Well, let me ask you this, Dan. I when you mentioned Volleyball World TV last week, I tried to find it through the app. Are they not going to do it through the app? They're just
no. We just in the short term we are. That's the next stage this next week. But in the short term, we just went through their YouTube channel because it takes a little things from the backside production wise to get done. But I think this week they're working on putting it actually on the app, and it would be in front of the paywall on the app as our rest of our season goes on. So
great. And with that, let's pick our top players of the week. And I think there's been a pretty strong pattern, and I'm curious if you guys are going to go along that pattern here that I've been recognizing when putting down the stats. So let's start with Jay, some top players of the week, and you can go one or two. I like putting the graphic up because that's been getting really good response. So
I'm going to go with two. I got Luke Benson for BYU. He had 21 kills, 4 aces against Loyola. That's a pretty good performance. My second one is Dan's kid, Daniel Haber, hit 478 against BYU. It's a sign of good things to come. He's a sophomore, and he's a fiery little competitor. So those are my two players of the week, but there's a lot to choose from.
All right, let's go over to Brad.
I got Will Rotman, 20 kills,
yeah.
I think 16, 20, 22, 16, and it's no surprise. He's a stud outside hitter. He's really good, really talented in serve receive. Him and Litsky, their connection seems to really have gotten super consistent throughout this year. So Will Rotman is my choice.
I'll jump on that because of the First Point Collegiate Challenge coming this weekend in Austin, Texas, where we'll be seeing Stanford, UCLA, USC, Ball State, Ohio State, and Penn State. So I'll talk a little more about that later. Let's go over to Dan.
Well, Rotman was my guy, and so now I hate that when that happens. You know what I mean? So
poaching out of the portal. Come on.
Right. So you're gonna go to Theo, and then I'm gonna pick.
Yeah, I can step in here. I'm gonna go Nolan Flexen, 20 kills with only 2 errors, hitting 667. One hell of a performance, and I think I want to throw in there too for the guys that are listening. So Nolan Flexen had a really interesting journey path in terms of where he then started at Grand Canyon, attempted to get into Irvine the first time around. It didn't end up working out after taking a year off, ends up going to Masters, was at the Masters last year, then comes back to Irvine. And for the last however long, that was if you went to 3-4 year universities, you had to sit for a year. That has been the rule for a really, really long time. The NCAA just passed, in the last month or so, that now if you transfer, they're pulling those restrictions away. As long as you're eligible, as long as the academics are there, they're allowing you to go ahead and compete. And so Nolan Flexen, one heck of a volleyball player, we wouldn't be seeing him right now. And with these rule changes, he's able to get out there and obviously make his mark, and he's having a, obviously a huge impact on Irvine's roster. And 20 kills, 667. I think there isn't a team in the country that can't use that. So that's Nolan Flexen for you. And then I'm going to go Patrick Rogers, Ball State, 14 kills against Brad's UCSD Tritons. He hit 550. Really, really impressive numbers, and had a great match. So those are my two. Dan, I hope I bought you enough time.
You bought me enough time. So yeah. Well, I got two. I got Ito David. His 5 aces against us were pretty key, and 2 of them came at the end of game 4 to kind of cinch the match. And then he had 0 errors against Loyola and hit like 600, which was pretty key in that match for them. And then my other one is Jacob Pasteur, and he had 220 kill nights that were pretty
Against
key
Brad.
and certainly carrying. And one on
Yeah,
Brad.
Dan,
Yeah,
what's going on? All the guys just
but yeah, double, 20 kills, 10 digs against Brad. Sorry, Brad. So, and then again had 23 kills, hit 514 against St. Francis. So pretty key in their 2 victories. So
I'll jump in the opportunity to add on to the jump on Brad moment. I'm actually talking to Jacob later today for a mini episode for First Point Collegiate Challenge. So I'm going to ask him about the San Diego match.
perfect. Yeah. No, he's a hell of a player. And yeah, and even on Theo's point, Pat Rogers played great, and really all of Ball State's offense played really great. I mean, they played really well against us, but Jacob, he's got a great calm demeanor on the court, and he's so steady, he's so consistent, as Dan knows firsthand through the last 3 or 4 years. He's a hell of a player.
Yeah, without doubt. Ohio State looking good here. Do you guys expect or suspect that there will be a lot of shifting in the AVCA poll this week? Because we actually meet, for all you who didn't know, we meet before the poll comes out. So, obviously with the upset of Irvine, ouch, and then BYU being beat by Lewis. Was there enough big upsets to shift it around a little bit, you guys think?
I think Ohio State might jump up a spot or 2. They would be the one, like, there's no losses yet, and Irvine with the loss, and then there might be some move in the mid pack, like up and down between the mid, and then some move between the lower pack. I think that's how you'll see it. I don't think you'll see somebody go from like 16 to 5 or something. I just think you're going to see some small shifts in terms. That's what the 20 allows you to do a little bit too, I think, from that standpoint. So
yeah, I'd agree with that. I don't think, in days of old, you might see a little bit of the bigger jump, but being on the voting committee, you're looking at 20 teams now, and you're looking at 2-3 game match weeks where a lot of those teams maybe won 2, lost 1, maybe won 1 big one but lost 2, or maybe 1 lost 1. Like, there's all these things that are happening, and they're all happening to each other, with the exception of the top 3, 4, 5 teams. So it's making the voting really important, and I don't mean important like in the grand scheme of things. If a team doesn't get recognized, it's a tragedy. But what I'm saying is, you need to be paying attention, and I think there's some really some good matches coming up that are going to maybe shuffle the deck a little bit more in the coming weeks. But the fact remains is, it's awesome to see, and it's giving these teams a little bit of a fighting chance when they see a number next to their name. Even if it's number 19, you're number 19. That's not a bad place to be. So it's pretty fun to watch.
That's a great point, because actually watching some of the matches, like use Brad, not jumping on you, Brad, actually going to commend you on this one, but let you see how good the teams are. They're battling the top teams to 5 sets and going deep into the 5th for a decision to happen. And I think, like, for instance, UC Santa Barbara is going through that right now. They're battling up 2-0, lose the next 2, battle in the 5th, and lose it. And you can't discredit that team.
I agree. And I'd love to see something come down in the future. I don't know if this is ever going to happen in men's volleyball, but it'd be pretty cool to see, kind of like how hockey does it overseas. If you win in 3 in their gym, you should be awarded a certain amount of points for that win. If you win in 3 at home, maybe not as much. If you win in 5 in their gym, if you win on a neutral court, if you lose at home, all these things should have some kind of a point system attached to it, so that you could really start to see, like, well, that's not an easy win for that team, or geez, that team should have been a little bit better than losing at 3, at home. Like, there's all these things that could give a little bit more in-depth perception as to what people are seeing and teams can do.
Yeah.
Oh, it's actually interesting, Jay. That's obviously how it's done in professional, right? Overseas, and in all of the big leagues, you get points for how many sets you win. And so it helps really clarify the standings, and going to 5 is something you'd be rewarded for, because it's much better than losing in 3. Just to give you guys a little bit of insight, the Big West, we are actually testing that out this year behind closed doors and looking
Not
at
anymore.
how,
You opened it.
Yeah.
well, what I mean by that is we're not actually putting it out there,
Gotcha.
right? So that we're going to take a look at how the season would have played out if we had done it that way versus how it plays out doing it the way it has been done. And the conversations that we're having is that this may be the future for the Big West. And I think it's for sure something that we should probably follow suit. We follow suit on almost every other thing that FIVB and the professional circuit does. So why not make this another one? You know,
I think it makes sense, like from a conference standpoint. I don't know if it would make sense from a national standpoint. Like, I only bring this up because, like, say you're UCLA and you want to play somebody who maybe is not at your level, and you want to play your second group, and you may drop a game. Like, so when you got, like, when you're professional and you do it, you're not dropping your roster. You have 14 guys, 12 guys. You're gonna play your best lineup all the time. You want to win every match. Like, you don't carry 20, 25 guys and you're trying to get reps for the freshmen or things like that. So that would be the only thing in terms of saying that side. We're in conference, though, you don't do that very often. It's like, I got to win every game now, or however I got to win it. So you play your strongest lineup. Do you know what I mean in terms of that?
Yeah,
So.
good point. Very good points. It'd be great to see. I'd love to see how it would shake down in the EIVA. So we might be making some phone calls here and getting some insight.
Well, only thing I'll add to our week 2 look results is Libero that stood out. Jay's guy, Paul Vichinsky, did a great job against us, but man, seeing the way the moves he's making, the balls he's getting up, and him in serve receive was amazing to see. I'm like, wow. I mean, Merck's in the conference with you, so he kind of is getting a lot of the attention, but gosh, watch Jay's guy, Vichinsky. Also regarding Nolan Flexen, obviously getting to see that firsthand. There is one ball on against Princeton, broken play, full out of system, just a high bump set with like a 2 in the middle. Triple block goes up on Flexen. He hits over the block in like 15-foot line. And I don't think I've ever seen anything like that before, because he's getting so high above the net that even the Princeton players are looking at each other like, what else can we do? You know? But I also want to acknowledge there were some records broken last week, and someone alluded to it earlier, and I didn't see it immediately because of the timing of Hawaii's finishing of the match on Friday and me prepping for the Irvine match on Saturday. But Luis Sakanoko also had 9 aces against Emmanuel on Friday night. And then Heno got 9 aces against Princeton, which they basically tied the Big West per single match record for aces. I want to also recognize that Hilaire Heno midweek against St. Francis set a new All Big West career ace record, surpassed Ryan Wilcox's former number of 135 over a 5-year career. Heno did it in 2 years and like 2 matches. So, and then he ended up getting 9 on Saturday night. So a lot more to go for Heno. So great work by all those individual athletes that played well. And telling you, Sakanoko, that is one boy who can hit the spit or snot out of the ball. So with that, let's go into our what you watching in week 2. And there is a lot, so feel free to name a few. So looking ready now is Dan, because he's just like staring at the screen with intensity.
Well, I don't want to take them all, but I'm going to bring up the first point challenge. Like, I mean, you got Ohio State versus UCLA, you got Ball State versus USC, you got Penn State versus Stanford, and then the second round becomes Penn State versus UCLA, Ohio State versus USC, and Ball State versus Stanford. So talk about some, hopefully you're there, Rob, like talk about some great volleyball. Like,
well, I don't want to go away from your picks, but I wanted to somehow communicate the importance of that event at is it the Southwest regional qualifier for boys club volleyball?
Right.
And because Texas doesn't have high school boys volleyball, and the fact that this is being held there, it's could be an influential event for the area.
Yeah, being somebody that played in it last year, it's a great event, and Glenn Litsky and his wife do a fantastic job, and First Point and Wade do a great job, and I think it's a great event for the area, and they're really working on growing boys volleyball in Texas, and we had a great turnout when we played in those matches, and they did such a phenomenal job. So yeah, it's really good.
All right. Other picks, so we don't diverge away from it.
Yeah,
That's it.
I'll jump in here. And I obviously knew at least Rob would be shouting out the first point challenge. So I stayed away from those ones. So you guys can keep talking more about those. But I think McKendree, Pepperdine is going to be an interesting one, seeing how those matches go through. Pepperdine had a good win against LMU, I think last night or 2 nights ago, really quickly, and kind of seeing some new faces. Cole Kaczynski's getting in for them, seeing how that group and that lineup starts coming together for Pepperdine against McKendree, who I think can have some big wins this year for sure. And then Jay continuing his quest to take down all of the Big West and destroy the Big West is going to continue with getting to go up against Long Beach as well. That'll be a good one for me that I'll be enjoying to watch. And then I'll save my other one, but I might, if it doesn't get shout out, I'll come back.
All right, let's go to Jay then, since he's been called out taking down the Big West.
Well, listen, it's we didn't take down everybody. I didn't beat Brad, so that didn't matter, and I didn't beat Santa Barbara. I'm gonna shout out 2 matches only because the other ones are everybody's picked. The Fighting Sam Schweiskys against the Theoites and the Giant Killer Brad Rostrader ensemble, if you will. Princeton's a good team, and they're obviously in the beginning part of their year. Their road trip to California every year, not like normal road trips where the team stays together everywhere. The team kind of scatters and stays at, various homes. There are a bunch of guys from California there, but they play a bunch of teams, and this is the second week coming up. They're going to be playing at Northridge and at San Diego, and it'll be interesting to see, does Harrington continue his serving prowess? Kid is bombing balls. And I'm interested to see what Omeni starts to do. He's not been a giant presence yet, but man, does he get up in the air. And Wedbush runs a really good offense. He's got good hands. He's smart. And he's got a little moxie to him, which is kind of fun to watch. So those are the 2 matches I'm going to be keeping an eye on most.
All right, that bounces it over to Theo.
Yeah, I definitely be watching that Princeton and San Diego match. Because that's how we are going to prepare for sure. I think Princeton is a really good team, so that's going to be a fun one. BYU and Santa Barbara. I think that's going to be a really interesting matchup too, right? Luke Benson and Bianchi. I think those, they got a lot of firepower on both sides of the ball there, and I think that'll be a fun one. And I think the third one that I'm going to shout out is Damon and Harvard. Harvard's a really talented team. We went 4 with those guys this week, and they went 4 also with USC, and it'll be interesting to see how that team develops. They got 2 really, really fantastic middle blockers. They have some consistent serving pressure. They got a great, talented lefty setter. That's a really good team. I think it'll be interesting to see how they match up with Damon.
Good calls. I'm going to throw in there. Yes, I'm watching on the first point challenge, but I'm going to look at particular athletes, and I'm sure you guys know more than I do, but I'm really looking forward to seeing Ball State, and I'm really hoping that Tinaishi and Davas Acheva shows up, is able to play. I know there's a situation there that is getting worked through, but gosh, that team becomes so much better if he's on the court for them. So really looking forward to hopefully seeing Mr. T on Ball State playing USC.
From what I hear, he's going to be there. So
wearing a uniform with shoes on and playing. Okay.
But no guarantees. That's just what I heard. So yeah.
That's excellent news to hear. And of course, everyone's watching UCLA Penn State, but I'm watching one matchup, and the 2 of my favorite middles to watch, Merrick McHenry and Toby Ezeonu. I mean, between the footage that I captured of both of them last year, these guys play at the waist above the net, and I want to see how they play against each other. So definitely 2 little pieces of this weekend, and hopefully get some content out and be watching your guys' matches when I can. So I'll have it on courtside.
I got one left, Long Island and Lindenwood, because I think Long Island beat Lindenwood last year. So it's kind of a rematch, I believe. So should be a good one. So.
Yep. Hey, Brad, you're on actually tomorrow quickly for Princeton, right? Is that a Tuesday match for you?
Yeah, Tuesday match, early match at 5 o'clock with, like Jay mentioned, kind of their travel patterns when they come out west. It makes their life a little bit smoother as they're navigating all of Southern California.
Any other items to be discussed, gentlemen? Last call, not far away.
I want to give a quick shout out to ESPN Plus, their coverage of men's volleyball. I know we've been talking a little bit about Volleyball World. They've been doing great stuff, but I really got to give a shout out to ESPN Plus. The quality of the coverage, the quality of the streaming has been really solid from top to bottom. And it's pretty nice when you just speak into your remote, ESPN Plus, and all of a sudden, boom, everything's lined up there in front of you. It's amazing technology these days. I know I'm kind of a dinosaur and I'm used to looking through the Reader's Digest and hope that I see something I like. It's pretty nice to just speak into the microphone and get what you want. So shout out to ESPN Plus. Great job out there.
Better technology than the clapper that you used to use, huh, Jay?
I still have one of those. That's funny you mentioned them.
I think this might be a topic for next week, but we've chatted a little bit about the challenge system in the past, and it is a great addition to our game. I do think that at some point we have to iron out some sort of time frame, some sort of a way to take a look at that challenge quickly and get the game going again. We ran into some real hiccups this past week, and I know that I have heard in past seasons when we were first implementing this, I think it was very new, and so it was kind of like, hey, it's just great that we have it. And now that we're starting to get it kind of across the board at all gyms, starting to come up with some sort of a streamlined way so that we can challenge plays and get the game going again quickly. I'm not exactly sure how we do it, knowing that everybody has a different system, but I do think that it's important for the viewership and for sure for the fans that are actually at the match.
Yep.
Theo, did you have a couple long ones? Challenges?
We had a couple that went at least 90 seconds or longer. And it was
all of ours have been super smooth, like maybe less than 30 seconds. But yes. I do think it's the systems. Like we've got Echo and there's 8 cameras, and you got refs that are used to it operation wise and an operator that's used to it. So I think all those things play into that sometimes. That's where the tough thing about the time thing on the flip side is if you don't have all those things, then you're negating the ability, like in terms of the operator and like all that stuff to be good. So
see, my only complaint for ESPN Plus, more coach views, close-ups of the coaches, so we can get the true shot of the good-looking guys on the podcast. That's my only complaint.
Rob, one last thing. We've been on the road the past 2 weekends, and I think every time around this year, like we go out and go do different things, see a lot of different teams, different families, different parents, and we receive a few notes, but just kind of thankful for all the viewers and all the support that we get on this podcast. And it's super positive, except for the people talking trash about Jay. But other than that, it's like super positive, really cool.
That's the best part. What are you talking about? Why do you think we keep him? Do you know what I mean? So,
but yeah, it's just, I mean, it's fun to hear that people enjoy listening to us hang out and talk volleyball, because I feel like it's just us hanging out weekly and forget that other people are listening to our conversations every once in a while.
Yeah, we definitely got a lot of notes this last week. And so I worked 3 matches, and, some people from the stands came down. Are you Rob? I just want to say thanks to your coaching panel. You guys are a great group of guys. There's a great chemistry. They enjoy the conversations and the banter. They said we need to stop picking on Jay, though. So that's why, Brad, you were in today.
But on that note, like, Rob makes this so easy on us. And I didn't get to watch a ton of volleyball this weekend. And Rob has it all broken down so that I can come into the office 30 minutes early, look through everything, and at least pretend to sound like I know something that happened this weekend. So thank you, Rob, for all you're doing for that. And all the compliments we get is a testament to you.
Honors all mine. Work with the guys like you guys.
Yeah, I there's not a week that goes by during men's season that somebody somewhere comes up to me, whether I'm in an opposing gym or in our own gym, and they say how much they appreciate the show and all the insights that we bring. So yeah, and Rob, you do make it easy for us. Thank you.
Hey, you guys are the best in the game. Love to have you guys on. So with that, best of luck in week 3, and look forward to chatting next week. And we'll see if we can get some other good news, some big items and some nice topics. And in fact, if you guys do have topics you want us to, throw at the coaching panel, feel free to DM me or even put on comments on Volley Talk. Oh yeah, I still go there. And then, we'd love to get in front of these guys. They have a great insight and experience as well. So, gentlemen, good luck. Enjoy the rest of your days, and I'll catch you next Monday.
Good luck, guys.
Yeah, good luck.
Thank you, Rob.
Thanks for listening to College Volleyball Weekly. Be sure to follow Rob Aspero at the Rob on the Mic on Instagram and at Rob on the Mic on Twitter.